When its evening celebration started to take shape, I thought I'd have to say something. After thinking about it, I know a few simple thank yous would not be enough. So I started to think about the last 50 years. It kept getting longer and longer. At first I was a little leery because it was getting so long. Then I thought, we're all here together, there's nowhere to go for a few hours, so I thought I'd tell you about our last 50 years. I hope it's not too boring and nobody falls asleep. Usually when someone gives a little speech or a talk, they start out with a little anecdote or a joke. I don't have either, but I do have a little insight and maybe a small reason why this union lasted 50 years. As many of you know who have been around us or out with us, I have been called and asked by you-know-who 2,167 times in those 50 years. But in all those years, I have never been yelled at, hollered at, or anything negative said to me about forgetting to put the toilet seat down. Seeing that I came from a career of all-male firefighters where putting the seat down was not a priority, I figure we're pretty even. Now looking back, it is hard to believe that 50 years have gone by. When you stand at the beginning of a nearly lifelong adventure and look forward, you can't imagine 50 years ahead. Yet looking back, it seems like to have rushed by. At the onset, it was two kids coming down the road to Cleveland in a 1950 Pontiac convertible whose roof leaked when it rained. Brennan and I settled into an apartment on Madison Avenue in Lakewood, paying $60 a month. Wow. Only my brother Harry, his wife, and their two children at the time. It is hard to imagine that our relationship would blossom into such a lovely family and wonderful friendships. It is easy to see why life's journeys and relationships are equated to a tree with its branches and leaves. We have children from 3 different states, a niece from Turkey, and friends from Denmark and Arizona, and relatives from many states. Our own family started with J.R. in 1962, who, thank God, waited for me to come home from a car race in Florida before he was born. Next came Vincent in 1967, and Vincent in 64, then Bernadine in 67, and lastly Jason in 76. From the union of J.R. and Judy came Harmony Lynn, our first grandchild, who herself is married to Brian and the parents of 2 wonderfully impish boys, Spencer and Aiden, which makes them great-grandchildren. And they were told not to call, guess who, great-grandma, so they call her Gigi. There are 3 other children that call us grandparents, Sydney, Alex, and Ashley. While I am talking about J.R., I have a little story to tell about him. When he was about 14, he and I were out in the car. He brought up how his mother was ranting and raving and going on and on about something. I reminded him that his mother was pregnant and almost ready to deliver what turned out to be Jason, and told him that when women get near the end of a pregnancy, now all you women out there don't get upset, they get upset and ornery at times because they can't sleep properly and haven't worn regular clothes for a long time and tend to rant and rave a bit. So in my wisdom, I told him to ignore her a little because it'll be over shortly. Well, lo and behold, who should be out in a car the very next day but J.R. and Verna May. And she is going on and on but J.R. is looking out the window and he's laughing. She catches him and asks, "What's so funny?" So naturally, he explains my advice. Well, I'm pretty sure I could hear the brakes squeal and the tires moan as she made a U-turn on the middle of Detroit Avenue. Thank God the kitchen door was open when she got home, as I'm sure she would have gone right through it. She proceeded to rant and rave and berate me that I told him to ignore her. When she was all done, she said to me, "Well, what have you got to say for yourself?" And all I could think of to say was, "You see what I mean?" We've laughed over that a few times through the years. Vince's marriage to Tracy resulted in 2 more lovely grandchildren, Olivia and Talia. Tracy and Olivia could not be with us tonight as they are back in California. And speaking of Vince, if ever there was a child that was destined to be an engineer, he's it. If anybody has ever been around an engineer, they tend to draw a diagram for you when they are explaining something complex. I think they feel you won't understand their explanation. Well, when Vince was born, he came out of the womb with a pad and a pencil, and on the pad there was an arrow with the words, "This way out." His destiny was sealed that day in 1964. Bernadine's marriage to Barry, who is also an engineer, produced 2 more grandchildren, Stone and Gates. Bernadine went to a local college, and after living at home for 2 years, we asked if she wanted to go away to school. Her answer was, "And live with an empty refrigerator? No way." But the one thing it took a while for me to figure out was why my wallet was always a couple of bucks lighter on the morning she had early classes and I was still in bed. But I figured it out. And next came what some call a surprise child, but we called him Jason. And he produced the lovely cake you see here today. Jason, Brennan, and I spent a year in Colorado. While I skied, Jason went to the 10th grade and Vernon knitted. I took Jason to school in the mornings, and some days we would pass the bank temperature sign that read -30. That wasn't ski weather. Our next family of friends came to us in my job as a firefighter. It was and still is a unique fraternity where you get to see and interact with other fathers and wives and watch your children grow and follow their lives as you watch your own children grow. As a tree grows and sprouts, I have watched many children from birth to manhood and womanhood, and for our family and friendships to grow larger. When I was on duty, more than once you heard fathers talking to their children, as we only had house phones at that time. And sometimes there was not a lot of privacy. A sampling of a phone conversation. Dad to Mom, put them on the phone. You know I was coming for the kid. But I always knew at the other end the kid was holding the phone 2 feet from his ear and thinking, well now, Dad is not going to be home until morning. I'll be in school by then, and we won't meet till dinner. He'll have forgotten what he was going on about by the time we meet. So such was life at the fire station, and I'm sure there's a few firefighters' kids that are laughing about that, knowing that's the truth. Bernard and I realized that family and friends, trees, lose their leaves and branches, just like real trees. And there are many family members and friends that have fallen from the tree of life. We miss each and every one of them dearly, but know we will meet again sometime in the future. Hopefully not for a while. Boy, I wish I knew what kind of advice to give to making a marriage last 50 years, but I do know that for over 50 years, Verna and I have been friends and lovers, and hope our friends and family look on us as good friends and parents. In closing, we'd like to thank each and every one of you for coming this evening to help us celebrate this special day in our lives. We would especially like to thank our children, J.R., Vince, Bernadine, and Jason, and hope that we hoodwinked them all these years into thinking that we're the best parents in the whole world. But all the while knowing that we're just 2 kids going down the road of life in a 1950 Pontiac convertible with a roof that leaks every time it rains. Thank you again for helping us celebrate this day.